Hello, and welcome to this short video on understanding vicarious trauma. Let me just share my slides with you. Bear with me a second. Okay, so what is vicarious trauma? Basically, vicarious trauma is where somebody experiences the symptoms of a traumatic reaction to an event without actually having experienced the event itself. Or it could be a build-up, as in the case of a counsellor who might be working with more than one trauma survivor. So you might be watching this having experienced this yourself, but equally you could be watching because you have heard about this and you want to understand it better. And this is good because if you are working with people who have suffered trauma, you might want to understand it better in order to, stop yourself from suffering from it. Now, I'm not going to promise that you're going to learn everything today in this short video, but I'm going to give you an idea of what you might need to be aware of. So my name is Jason, and I've been a counsellor and therapist for about 10 years. And I have a lot of experience of working with trauma. In particular, I worked for a charity supporting under 18s who had experienced sexual harm. And what I've come to realise is that my original training, and indeed the training of others that I've spoken to, has not really prepared them for working with trauma at all, nor to recognise or understand how it might affect them. In fact, I would suggest that many trainees don't even know what vicarious trauma is. So what I want to tell you today is that vicarious trauma can happen to anyone. And more specifically, it can happen to people in our profession. But it's most likely to happen to those who are unaware and therefore don't know what precautions to take. It's also more likely to happen to those who have or are susceptible to burnout. Now, burnouts and vicarious trauma are not the same thing, but what they do share in common is that they are experienced by people who don't have adequate levels of self-care in place. And we'll talk about self-care in a moment. But first of all, I just want to look at what some of the warning signs might be for vicarious trauma. A very common one is nightmares. Actually having nightmares about or around the subjects that they might have talked about with clients. Not being able to sleep very well, which I kind of think goes hand in hand with nightmares, perhaps. Feeling sad for no obvious reason. Angry outbursts, perhaps unwarranted by the circumstances, and feeling anxious or on edge a lot of the time. Now, that might be similar to somebody who suffered with burnout, but I think there are some there that are very much more specific to vicarious trauma. So let's talk about self-care. Now, I think most people think they know what self-care looks like, but at a deeper level, are we really looking after ourselves so that it's relatively easy to switch off completely after a stressful or challenging day? Do we have at least one person we can offload to when things get tough? This is, of course, essential. And I think, perhaps many of us know that we need good supervision, but do we have someone that we can really offload to and talk to personally? So where self-care is concerned, I think it fits into 5 main categories, which you can see here: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and aesthetic. Well, physical should be reasonably self-explanatory in terms of eating and sleeping well, for example. Mental is about ensuring that we're well trained for the kind of work that we're doing. Emotional might mean getting our own counselling from time to time, or, as I said, being able to talk to a close friend or relative. Spiritual might mean meditation or prayer, but for some it could just mean getting out into nature. And finally, aesthetic, which perhaps some people don't think about very much, but really refers to the kind of environment that we're working in. Is that environment aesthetically pleasing to us? So I'm going to be running a 1-day workshop in February 2025, and I would love you to be there. We will go into more detail in this workshop about these aspects of self-care. But it will be so much more than that. You will also learn about empathy and compassion. So, are they the same thing? Well, no, not really. Whilst I believe it's not possible to have too much compassion, it very definitely is possible to have too much empathy. And I think this is what ultimately leads to vicarious trauma. So we need to be able to control our empathy. And is that really possible? Well, some people might say that empathy is something that you just feel naturally, but it isn't really. I mean, babies don't have empathy, for example. Most teenagers, I would argue, don't have much. So no, it's not natural, which means just as we can learn it and nurture it, so we can also learn to monitor it and therefore control it. And in this workshop, I will tell you how. And I want it to be experiential as much as anything. So although there will be some theory, what I want you to go away with is a feeling of being really equipped to understand yourself better in order to help your clients. So if you're watching this and you want to get in touch today, I will make sure you get a place on this valuable workshop. There will be a limited number of spaces available, so I'd recommend you don't take too long to make that decision. As you can see, it's going to take place in Bedford. And if you want to contact me, my email address is jason@jrbtherapy.org. My number is 07984 997 562. And I really look forward to welcoming you on the day.